Lieutenant Steve Hauck in studio. Good morning.
Good morning, Bill.
Things were a little better last night. It seemed in Missouri, in Ferguson.
Yep.
There didn't seem to be the rioting. They didn't. When you're looking at those pictures, a lot of criticism is going out there saying the way to combat this is not going in with the guns and with what looks like armored vehicles. And I mean, at what point does that have to become part of your arsenal as a policeman?
Yeah, I think that
at
least what's going on in Ferguson, I think, is a little unique in the respect that I think you've seen they went out very strong, and then they backed off a little bit, and then they've come back strong a little bit, and they're backing off. It's a little bit unique in that respect.
Well, it's inconsistent.
Yeah, but you have to look at it and say the people on the ground have to make those decisions based on what they see. And we talked the other day is that we use force to combat force, so we're using force consistent with the force that's being used against us. So you might see what's going on. You might see the crowd one night be big and then the next night small, and that way you might see the police operations might be big and small depending on what the crowd is.
Yeah. Okay, so now it's coming out. As we said, it seems like there's got to be more to this story. Now it is coming out that this police officer, he has a dislodged eye socket. He was hospitalized. At one point, his gun was taken away while he was trying to put this Michael Brown into his patrol car. Maybe the gun discharged. Then he got away and he tried to arrest him. And then this guy, according to about a dozen witnesses now, say that he charged after the police officer.
Right.
Okay. Do you use a stun gun? Do you use your club? Do you shoot him? Does this change things? The fact that he was coming after him and he'd already been injured. The officer had already been injured.
When we investigate use of force by any of our officers, in every single instance, at least for the Utica police, every single instance of force that's used is investigated by several different layers. So we make sure that when officers are using force, that they're using it appropriately in every manner. Not necessarily what type of force they use specifically. We're investigating that as well as when they use force at all. So the most important part of that is the person that's using it, because they have the first hand.
He's the only one
by himself.
There. Yeah.
He's I read some of the articles last night. Again, there's still information coming out that perhaps he did know that they were suspects in a robbery.
Yeah.
So I don't think we're going to know that. Like I said the other day.
Doesn't that stink? Because they didn't come out in the beginning. Mm-hmm. Now it looks like, he's making up this story, saying, I did know, because the police chief came out and said he didn't know.
Right.
He didn't know there'd been a robbery. Now he's coming out and saying he did know. This is that mishandling of this whole situation by that local police department that has just made this so much worse, it seems.
Yeah, I think now that we said that the other day, both of us, that we think there's got to be more to this story. Mm-hmm. And that's part of the problem. It does show now, hey, wait a minute, maybe they should have given out some more information, even if it was preliminary, to
So the guy's already been punched in the face, he's already been hit in the eye, his eye's bleeding or whatever, he can't see out of his eye. I don't know what happens when you dislodge an eye socket, but now he's coming after you.
Right.
If you feel your life is in danger, that would justify the use of using a gun?
It would.
Yeah. Leroy is standing by the line right now. Lieutenant Steve Hauck in studio from Utica Police Department. We're talking about what's going on down in Ferguson versus what happens in the rest of the world, in the rest of the country anyway. Go ahead. What do you have? Leroy, line number 1. Are you there?
Hey, good morning, Bill.
You're on, man.
Hi. Yesterday, when I was listening to the show, I heard the lieutenant mention something about there are certain circumstances where police would be able to shoot unarmed citizens. As a citizen, as a father, that concerns me greatly. Especially seeing that there are at least 3 types of non-lethal weaponry that they are able to use. I just don't see a situation other than a suspect on top of the police officer trying to crush his head in where using a gun would be justified.
Do you want to comment on that?
I think he gave a great example of it. And like I said there's certain situations. It's certainly not commonplace. But there are certain extreme situations where an officer would do that, and that would be one of them.
So you're keeping that door. You're keeping that door open that there could be the possibility in this case where this officer was justified.
You have to,
Yeah.
because that is, you have to remember one thing. Whenever a police officer walks into the room, there's always at least one gun in that room.
Right.
So if that gun's taken away,
what about the
consequences would be
Utica
devastating.
police officer recently? Didn't a bystander come in and help him? He was what is that?
That's a great example of
Yeah.
it. The officer, and we've had this happen many times throughout my career, where an officer ends up wrestling for their own gun. And if that gun is anybody that's willing to try to take a gun away from a police officer, they're not going to do good things with it. So the officer in that situation would have to use whatever force necessary
Yeah.
to stop that.
Can you agree with that, Leroy?
I can agree if the suspect is trying to take a weapon or if he's caught the officer by surprise and injured him greatly. But in this case, right here, what we're hearing is that the suspect tried to get the gun went off, then the suspect ran away, and then stopped or even charged at him.
Yeah, that came back. Supposedly, according to witnesses, came charging back after him.
My concern with that is was it really necessary?
Okay, were there alternatives? I mean, and I guess you'd have to put yourself into the shoes of that officer.
That's the most important
That's
part.
the hardest part.
Right, because we don't know, and again, this is what we believe to be the truth.
Right.
We still don't know if this is really the truth. I think
Yeah.
once this goes through the court process, I said yesterday, I certainly expect this to be presented to a grand jury.
Which is underway today, I believe.
At that point, then we'll start to know real, true
Yeah.
facts. Then you can, make an opinion yourself, and obviously the legal aspects will be applied. So I don't think we really know all of it yet.
Leroy, thank you. But yeah, I think we all can agree that this has got to be handled very carefully, because if it does come out that this officer responded properly, which I'm beginning to lean towards, that seems to be where this is going. If he acted properly, how do you get these people that are in the streets to not riot even more? I mean, this will turn into another LA, which really it already has, I guess. Leroy, I appreciate it. Thank you, man. Maurice, you're on the radio. Go ahead. Lieutenant Steve Hauck, UPD in studio.
Hello?
Yeah, Maurice, just use your real voice. Go ahead.
Yes, this is Maurice.
Hello, Maurice. Yes.
Yes, I completely agree with Lieutenant Hauck. And I think that if it is shown, and we will find out,
Yes.
the truth will come out. As you say, we need to have the grand jury.
For the record, Maurice, this is John who called me last hour, and we kind of went at it. So,
No, this is Maurice.
okay, Maurice. Thank you. So,
I beg your pardon, this is Maurice.
yes, I'm sorry. This is John's brother.
No, this is
okay.
Maurice.
Okay, Maurice. Yes, go ahead. Get your point out there.
That what happens is that the truth will come out in time, and it is very possible that you will see that if this young man that was killed was unjustly killed, then he could very well be. It could be a symbol of the racism in America.
Is there a little? I detect a little accent and a little sarcasm.
No.
I think he's being serious.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm trying to be serious.
So what is your point here? Is that
My point is that the facts will come out. We need to, cooler heads need to prevail.
listen, we're all with you. That's really what we just said.
Yes, and I'm
Yeah.
agreeing with you.
So you're agreeing with me. This is what we've been saying all morning long. I don't know why your cousin John last hour would disagree with me the way he disagreed with me. I don't get it.
What kind of an accent is that, Maurice?
What?
It's a fading accent, is what it is.
It's a what?
It's a fading accent. It's one that starts out as an accent and then turns into the guy who called last hour.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, John. They came back with the accent for a second. Frank, you're on with Lieutenant Hauck. Go ahead.
Yes, good morning.
By the way, just for the record, I did enjoy that, Maurice. That was an interesting call. I was amused.
And actually, I know Maurice. He goes by Mo. So just call him
Mo, okay. Mo knows.
That's okay.
To Frank, go ahead, you're on.
All right, yes, sir, thank you. This is my take on the subject. I'm a long-time Utica resident. If the police officer tells me stop, I stop. If
Yes.
the police officer tells me freeze, I freeze. Tell them, put your hands up, put my hands up. Well, I'm not an idiot here. These people, there's people saying this young man, it's unfortunate that he got shot. Okay, but here's the point. They're saying, oh, he was a college student, he's going to college. If you rob somebody, strong arm robbery, I didn't see the video, I'm just guessing as to what happened. You rob somebody, now you're on the loose, you know you just robbed somebody, and now you see a police officer coming after you, you know you just did something wrong.
Yeah, that's part of this.
You're going to say, oh my God, a police officer asked me, I got to get out of here, I got to do something. But if you did nothing wrong, you have nothing to fear.
Right.
It doesn't matter what color you are, what race you are, how big you are.
First of all, can I tell you, Frank, that the family and the attorney that came out for the family during a press conference, they're not claiming this kid was a good kid. They're saying not only was he a handful, but he was, in many ways, he was violent. They described a situation where the father had to hold the kid down. I mean, he was trouble. There's no doubt this kid was trouble. The question is, and the lieutenant, I wanted to answer this, whatever happened to, and I think we discussed this on Monday, whatever happened to the days when there was a respect for a police officer, when he said, stop, you would stop. Is it still there and just not with some people?
Well, I can just tell you in my career, I remember, when I first started in 1995, the disrespect that you would get on the street was seldom. It didn't happen often.
Yeah.
But you did get it, certainly. Now, I would say it's much more frequent.
And spit on.
Yeah.
Urine being thrown on the police officer last night.
All those things.
All of that stuff.
Yep.
So part of your training has to be, how do you not shoot somebody when they spit in your face?
Well, one of the things that I read this morning, and not to be really critical, but the captain that kind of took over the operations here, I saw this morning he praised the demonstrators for the situation not getting escalated last night. I would have liked to have seen him praise the police officers for the last 3 or 4 nights they've been shot at and not returning fire. I don't think you can ever ask anybody, especially police officers, to go out there and get shot at and not return fire.
And you heard a lot of people saying, there were innocent people who were marching, protesting
of course.
Peacefully that were injured. So how could this happen? Well, you don't know if you're standing on the corner of Genesee and Bleecker, and there's something happening up near the Radisson, and then police are coming from Oriskany Boulevard and they're making their way up to get rid of the crowd. It may seem peaceful for you on the busy corner, whereas as you get up near the county office building, it isn't so peaceful. Not to use a Utica reference, but that person in that little part of their world, they don't know what's happening a quarter of a mile away.
These demonstrations are going on essentially 24/7. Right. During the day, it's very peaceful. I suspect that that's probably protesters, people that are really just protesting. Mm-hmm. But the criminals are using the dark of night to cover and using other protesters. I suspect they're probably running up in front of the crowd, taking a couple shots at the police, and then running to the back of the crowd. Right. And who's left in front? But real protesters who are being put in the line of fire.
I can say this is the same thing that we're seeing done in around the world, right?
Absolutely. Use innocent people as shields.
Yeah. Fran, go ahead. I'll do this. I'm not going to break. Go ahead, Fran.
Yeah, how you doing, Bill?
Good.
Long-time listener. I appreciate what you do very, very much. I'd like to go back to that Leroy going in. And I just... What is this officer supposed to do? The kid tried to take his gun away, right? And then he goes away and he comes back. He's not going to go after his gun again.
Yeah. Well, and the other question I'd ask the lieutenant is, how do you know that he doesn't have a weapon on him? How do you know that he hasn't shown that he has a knife? How do you... these are all unknowns that if you make contact, you will quickly find out, right?
Well, I think a lot of us are a little bit of a guessing game, obviously. You try to put yourself in the mind of the police officer and also the person, the man that was shot. So I would think that possibly the officer maybe was already debilitated and felt that maybe he couldn't sustain another attack.
Right.
I'm guessing here, obviously, but maybe something like that would have come into play. I don't know.
All right, Fran, this is it's going to be really interesting to see how this thing unfolds.
In the long run, who's going to pay for this? I feel sorry for the taxpayers in that community.
Man, I got to tell you, it's think about they started school this week there in Ferguson, Missouri. They started school, but they didn't. Schools have been closed ever since. Businesses are shut down. It is brutal. So, all right, Fran, thanks. I got a break. We'll do news coming up in 2 minutes. It's First News Keeler in the morning.
You were, absolutely. Yeah. Very early on, we were fairly certain that the child was not alive.
Yeah.
However, we weren't 100% certain. And even if we were, I don't think that necessarily would have shared that publicly. However, I was able to say it in ways that essentially inferred it but didn't say it, because it was a criminal case that we were working on. So in law enforcement, a lot of times when you've got open cases, especially something like this, a use of force resulted in a death, it's a big case. There's a lot of investigation that goes into it. However, when people start rioting in the streets, information needs to come out, not necessarily the video of the robbery,
Right, it's gonna maybe
whatever you want to
incite,
call it, took place. So I think that, I guess if in hindsight, an armchair quarterback, it probably wasn't handled well publicly.
Yeah. Tom, go ahead, you're on the radio.
Yes, the question was asked a while ago when people started losing respect for police or having disrespect for it. And what I remember, being older than most of you guys, is back in the 60s when you had the anti-war riots and the hippies and the beatniks and the whole thing, and they started referring to the police as pigs.
Yeah.
And that's where some of the respect for the police department started going down. People would hear that and not having dealt with the police, they knew nothing different. Oh, all police are pigs.
Well, then,
Some of the disrespect came from.
and then we capped it off with Watergate. And now it completely changed the innocence of this country. It really did. The 60s, Vietnam, all of the civil rights, all of that, it just changed the innocence of America. And then,
it did.
you know.
And in a lot of cases, some of the negativity came from the media, who followed this example of calling the police pigs. They treated the police negatively as if they were all, Neanderthals and violent and everything, and people started believing that, and the trust between police and the public, a lot of it was eroded.
Yeah. Do you agree with some of that? I mean, there also is a culture, there's a culture here of distrust in that young male black community where this no snitching. If something happens, you don't tell anybody because you don't trust police. That exists, right? And it probably exists here in Utica.
It does exist, and it's perpetuated, and not because they don't trust police, and I speak to like the average witness out there, it's because they fear retaliation by people within their community. So it's not a distrust of police, it's a fear of the people that might retaliate against them for cooperating with police.
See, I'm a Carmelo Anthony fan, of course, being a Syracuse basketball fan, but he was in some video where he actually talked about no snitching, and he endorsed that. When it's coming from the icons of sports, that also doesn't help it any.
No, it doesn't. And,
pretty scary.
And the problem is the people that allow this or perpetuate this sort of thought process want to know why crimes aren't solved, and and these are the reasons why crimes are not solved.
And how is this any different than when you saw the mob wars going on in the 1920s and 30s and even 40s and 50s, where if you wouldn't talk to police, right? How many times was there a mafia case in Chicago or New York that no one would come forward because they feared for their lives? You could never go forward. Right?
It's exactly the same.
This is really kind of the same thing.
It was against the code.
It's against
right,
the code.
It's against the code.
It's also against
right?
it's against the I'm going to be in big trouble if I say something.
Sure. And you go back to the disrespect for police. I think some of it is people that maybe are lesser advantaged in the communities, that they're having a hard time either financially or personally.
Yeah.
They, I think, perhaps look at the government and say, geez, I'm in a bad shape and you're partly to blame for it. And they look at the police as an arm of the government. So they're not going to walk into their congressman's office or the vice president or the president. They're going to see us on the street. Yeah. And unfortunately, sometimes I think maybe we get the brunt of that. When
there is
we're in the same boat as everybody else is.
There is an entitlement mentality going on right now, and poverty will breed that. William, go ahead. You're on with Lieutenant Hauck.
Good morning, fellows. And Bill, thanks for always taking my call. I have to buy you a beer one of these days.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, I got three observations here. Is one, the media, they felt it was okay to release the officer's address and showed a map. I didn't think that was cool. And then another observation I had. There's probably fingerprints on this weapon, but nobody's really talking about that. And the third thing is, I don't know if you heard some of the coverage, but there's a woman she's on all over the place. Her name is Jody, and some people are saying she's an eyewitness, but I don't think she is.
Was she the? What do we know about that? I think she was the woman that called into the radio station.
Yeah, who is she? Where is she from?
I don't know. She's supposedly a friend. If it's the one that I think you're talking about, she's supposedly a friend of the police officer who says that
because she knew a lot of details.
Yeah.
Only he would know.
Correct. She's a friend of the police officer, and there are two people that have come out. But now you have about a dozen witnesses who say they saw it, and it is in line with the police officer is saying.
Right, but those details that she is exposing shouldn't have been exposed.
You're probably right. Yeah. Meanwhile, I mean, William, you got to know that here is CNN primetime coverage. They're putting their reporters out in the middle of these riots. Do you think they have ratings on their mind at all? Just a little bit?
Yeah, it's disgusting.
This is what was the last thing they got all the ratings on? What was the last?
It was the plane.
The plane crash. That went on. By the way, they've forgotten all about that. We haven't found the plane, but they've given up on that story. That one's gone.
They love it. And here's another observation. Whatever end or solution we come to, or whatever decision's made or what conviction, no one's going to be satisfied.
You're right. So how this stuff comes out is going to be pretty, I got to come out pretty carefully with it. Kevin, go ahead. I'll take a couple more on this. Go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, Bill, just wanted to say, I blame the media a lot, only because the first eyewitness they had was the kid that was in the armed robbery. Of course, he told the media, "Oh, we're just walking down the street."
Right.
The cop did whatever, and that's the second thing. Josie there was the lady that called in.
Yeah.
Most of her testimony or what she said was, confirmed.
Yeah, and that is, she seems to be friends with the officer, and she got that information from.
Or something like that.
Yeah, right. You're probably right. It's probably a wife or somebody that told her.
Right. But my main thing is CNN and MSNBC. They all went to this kid who hasn't been arrested yet.
Yeah.
As part of the robbery.
Well, and I think police said that I'm losing your call just a little bit here, Kevin. But the police are saying they are not going to arrest him. I don't know why, based on what we saw in there, but he's not going to be arrested.
Well,
at least is what they're saying.
Anything.
Yeah. All right, Kevin. Crazy story, man. It is consuming all of us. So I'll take one more call. But anything in closing you wanna add on all of this? I asked you, how do you handle the tensions, racial tensions that do exist, and what does the Utica Police Department do to try to address this problem of this distrust or this fear of coming forward and giving information?
I think it's probably not waiting till incidents occur to try to, narrow the gap. I think for years, the city government, the police department, a lot of organizations have done a good job to try to get together and try to understand each other a little bit better. I think it's definitely helped.
The mentality, this is my town, these Yankee reporters think they're going to come down here, and probably not a good mentality.
No, I wouldn't say so.
Yeah, it was good on Dukes of Hazzard. I liked it. Stefan, hold on. I'm going to take you in a second. We'll wrap this up here for the morning. 8:50, back in 2 minutes in WIBX.